The keys I'm using are in the bottom right corner of the viewport. I delete the cube and add a plane, rotating it around the x-axis 90 degrees and applying the rotation. I also scale the plane up by 2 and apply the scale. In edit mode, I add vertical and horizontal loop cuts and extrude them out along the y-axis to give the crate some depth. If I open the UV editor, I can see that I already have a UV. I duplicate the plane. This will be my high poly model. I hide the low poly, and in edit mode, I begin to model one side of the crate using the high poly model. I use a sphere that I cut in half to make the nail heads. For the slats, I add a cube and scale it to the proper size. Separating it from the rest of the object. In object mode, I add a bevel modifier and then an array modifier to complete the slats. I then join the objects together. I'll be using xNormal for baking. The link is in the description. I select each of the objects one at a time and add a triangulate modifier. This is needed to use xNormal. I then export each object as an OBJ. I open xNormal and upload my high poly mesh and low poly mesh by dragging and dropping my OBJ files into the proper slots. I then go to Tool and use the Ray Distance Calculator. I copy the results to the low poly version. Under the Bake options, I'll bake a normal map and an AO map. I choose where I want the maps to save to, and also the resolution, and then click Generate Maps. Back in Blender, I hide the high poly mesh and open the shader editor. I open the material for the low poly mesh and add a normal map node, selecting the UV map. And drag in the normal map. I change the color space to non-color and connect the image texture to the normal map node. When I change to viewport shading, I now see the normal map affecting my object. I changed the roughness of the principled shader to 1. I also drag in a gradient texture that I made in GIMP and connect it to the base color. I then drag in the AO map and change the color space to non-color. I add an ambient occlusion node and a mix shader. I place the mix shader between the principled shader and the material output and connect the nodes, changing the factor of the mix shader. I can now make 5 copies and move them into place, completing the crate. I can now simply join everything into a single object.